I've realized one of my favorite things in life is noodles. And I think I'm not alone, but depending on where you live, great noodles can be surprisingly hard to come by. So today I'm gonna show a surprisingly easy and very satisfying recipe for hand-pulled noodles. We're gonna cover two incredibly delicious sauces that don't just work perfectly with these noodles, they'll go with almost anything for a quick dinner. What is easily the fastest method to get a delicious noodle broth, and of course, the hand-pulled noodles themselves, which may sound or look intimidating, but I can promise these are like the gateway drug of noodle making. They are easier than European pasta making and many of the more complex pulled noodle styles. So let's dive right into the noodles. Combine 300 grams of bread flour with a pinch of salt and then slowly stir in 115 milliliters of water. I like to use the stiff handle of a wooden spoon. If your dough still has a lot of dry flour, keep slowly drizzling water up to an extra 60 milliliters. Once it's mostly together, start to press it into a ball and then put it onto your counter and knead it. Kneading dough is one of those techniques that if you slightly tweak what you're doing, you can get the same result much more efficiently. And what you're trying to do is stretch the dough. What I like to do is tug the edge away from me, fold it over to the top towards me, and then use my other palm to press the fold. Then I make a quarter turn and do it again. And with just a little bit of practice, you can do a bunch of folds very quickly. And you'll find the dough is nice and springy in just a few minutes. When you press in with your finger, you want it to quickly bounce back. Then put it back into the bowl, cover that with a moist towel and let it rest for 5 minutes. Then pull it out and start kneading again. I'll knead these until I start to see these little tears forming on top, which in bread making would be a defect. But with these type of noodles, getting that extra gluten development will help the stretching go a lot smoother. Then rest it again for 5 minutes, knead it one more time, and then rest it for another 5 minutes. In total, you've kneaded it 3 times and rested it 3 times. And at the end of that final rest, pressed it into a sort of a rectangle and cut it into quarters. Then lay the portions on their back and use a rolling pin to lay them out flat. Brush both sides of the dough with a little bit of oil and cover the noodles for at least an hour, but up to 3 days. I didn't try this myself, but I'm pretty confident that you could make a large batch and freeze them at this stage. While those are resting, let's make some sauces. Add 200 grams of soy sauce, 60 grams of sweet soy sauce, which I cannot recommend highly enough, and 80 grams of what is one of my all-time favorite vinegars, Chinese black vinegar. Also add 3 star anise pods and a small handful of fennel seeds. Bring this flavor bomb up to a boil, turn the heat off, cover it with a lid and let it steep for 15 minutes, then scoop or strain the seeds out. Beyond being an incredible noodle sauce, these would also be a great dumpling sauce or just a general purpose dipping sauce. I personally am a whole spice user, even though when I want a little bit of something ground, I always wish I had a jar of that pre-ground spice lying around. That said, if you do buy your spices ground, you wouldn't even need to cook this. Just combine the liquid ingredients along with maybe a teaspoon of each spice and shake it up, and I bet it will turn out nicely. While that was steeping, I sliced 3 scallions, then I wiped out the pot, added the scallions into it along with 5 grams of Sichuan chili powder, which is one of the all-time great chili powders. Truly, find it somewhere online and you can thank me later. 5 grams of ground cumin with 100 grams of grapeseed oil. Then I turned the heat on and brought everything up to a simmer, and as soon as it was simmering, I immediately turned the heat off. The chili and the cumin will both burn quickly, so it's worth keeping a close eye on this one. Just don't shove your face over the pot because that chili might toast your nostrils a little bit. These two sauces are amazing, and they work beautifully with the noodles, but don't sleep on them for general use around your kitchen. For example, this pork tenderloin, which I cleaned up by trimming off some of the silver skin and then cut into planks and then strips, and I marinated the strips with both the chili oil and the noodle sauce, along with kosher salt for about 30 minutes, and it was delicious. We're gonna cook that in just a minute, but for now, while that marinates, let's talk noodle broth. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I love making broth, stock, whatever at home, especially when the weather is cold and I can keep it slowly simmering all day and smell the smells and feel the warmth. To me, there's nothing better than that. And in fact, I originally made this recipe with a slow simmered bone broth, but there are so many advantages to the quick doctored stock, especially when you've got the punchy flavors of the two sauces here. So I combined a 32-ounce box of beef broth with a nice handful of chopped ginger, a few star anise pods, and some fennel seeds, and simmered it for 30 minutes before pouring it through a strainer. Now that the pork is marinated for about 30 minutes, slide it into a 425-degree oven for about 10 minutes until it's just cooked. This pork alone, I think, is well worth trying these sauces for. Last thing before the noodle stretching is taking a head of Napa cabbage, cutting the root off and peeling off some of the, shall we say, nasty outer leaves, then taking a few of the nice ones and slicing them up. You're gonna wanna stretch the noodles and then immediately drop them into a pot of boiling water. In fact, I had to film this twice because the first go around, playing with my camera to get both shots led to a very clumpy ball of noodles. So make sure to get your water boiling before you start stretching. Take out a piece of dough and use your fingers to flatten it into a wider rectangle, and then pick it up between your fingers. Try to avoid holding it with your fingertips and instead hold it with the long side of your thumb, and then slowly pull it apart to about shoulder width, and then start to gently slap it onto your counter as you slowly pull it longer and longer. If one of the ends tears, just pick it up at the tear and keep going until it's a little bit less than your full wingspan. Grab it right at the middle of the middle and tear it in half. But try to keep the ends connected so it's almost like a circle of dough, and drop it right into your boiling water along with a nice big handful of cabbage, and boil them for 2 minutes, then strain them, or use one of these noodle boilers. My wife just bought this for me from Corin in my hometown of New York, and I already love this thing. Add a nice pour of the sauce and plenty of the chili oil. Toss them up, throw them into a bowl along with a good filling of noodle broth. These noodles made my day, and I think they're well worth a try. But anyway, that's all for me on this one. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.